You're all set. Have a great meeting, guys.
All right. Thanks, Melissa.
Melissa.
All right. So I think, I don't know that we need to read that recitation anymore. So I
Not
think
anymore.
we can
No,
go
it's
right
just
into it.
posted, that's all. No, we don't need
Okay.
it.
Gotcha. So, hey, welcome everybody. Joe, nice to see you in person. I don't think we've met before, so it'll be good to have you on board. Just to quickly, Joe, bring you up to speed. We've met once before, which is back
I watched the meeting.
Oh, you did. Gotcha. Good boy. You're diligent.
So-
Okay. So, it was basically just housekeeping at that point. We appointed a chairperson. We assigned people to take minutes. Andrew did a great job doing the minutes for last meeting. And then.
Should I take the minutes for this one?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say, if somebody wants to alternate between you and Jesse and Andrew, and then going forward, Alex is our Zoom czar. And now I'm going to be taking care of all the agendas and getting that meetings posted and all that stuff. So just to recap the allocations of responsibility, because we don't have a staff person supporting us. We're kind of on our own.
Yep.
So, okay. So let me knock some pure housekeeping matters out of the way. The minutes from last meeting, hey, Andrew, great job. They look fantastic. So thank you very much for doing those. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at those. It's only a page and a half. But if anyone has any comments to them, then let's just make a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Okay.
Second it.
All right, great. So all those in favor of approving the minutes.
Do we have to do this by name now, or is that over because of the COVID?
I think it's still roll call if it's on Zoom.
All right, we'll do a roll call. So motion to approve the minutes circulated by Andrew. Alex, could you roll?
No, we'll just call us by name. I'll say aye.
Alex, okay. Andrew?
Jesse?
Yeah, aye.
Jesse?
Aye.
Okay, and Joe doesn't hear us, but
Abstain.
I'll say aye as well. Okay, so those are approved. And then, hey, Andrew, I guess one other housekeeping thing, whoever keeps the minutes, once we approve them, can that person be the person to post them to the town clerk too?
Yep.
I got a nasty gram from the town clerk because I guess there's a rule that they have to be submitted to the town clerk within 45 days of the meeting. And I didn't know about that. And our last meeting was July 13th and everyone's schedule was jammed up in August. So we didn't have a meeting until
Yep.
6
That's
days
fine.
later. So,
Yeah, I'll send them over.
Okay, that'd be great, Andrew. I don't know if I'm going to public meeting jail or not for that, but we'll just take care of that better next time.
Certainly not the first time and will never be the last time.
Okay.
I'm beginning to think if I don't get called on something at any given time, I'm not doing enough.
Okay. That sounds great. Okay, good. And then Joe has been nice enough to volunteer to take the meetings for this. Sounds great. One other small housekeeping matter. I was told earlier on that we should try to come up with a name for this subcommittee if we want. Right now, it's called the 21 Highland Street Affordable Housing Subcommittee, which is kind of a mouthful. Do we care about making it something shorter and pithier, or do we care?
We can call it what we want. I mean, if to change it, I think we have to go back to selectmen. So
Oh, we do?
I
I
would just say,
that.
let's call it like, I don't know, South Union or 21 Highland Committee. Or
All right.
something.
Okay,
How
but
about
we're not going
ourselves?
to formally
How about
adopt
the
a new
21
name. They have to
committee?
go.
About
Okay,
21 committee. Nice and sweet.
that sounds great. So, this is really getting into a little more substance. The first meeting we kind of, we took care of housekeeping things and talked about some broad concepts. But I think, it's the first time we've really had a chance to talk about what, the function of this subcommittee is and what our charge is and what our mission is and what it is we're supposed to be doing over the next, 3 to 6 months and what, what's the end point of our mission? What is the deliverable that our masters want us to, to deliver back to them at the end of this process? And so, we are all appointed to the subcommittee for that purpose. And the charge was assess the property at 21 Highland Street for potential redevelopment into affordable / market rate housing. So I view that as broad and amorphous. So I thought we should just spend a few minutes just talking amongst ourselves conceptual about what we think that means and what tangibly we're going to be doing over the next 3 to 6 months. What are we trying to accomplish? What is the manifestation of that accomplishment going to be at the end of this process? And so I don't want to talk the whole time, but let me start off with just giving you the way I interpret this is, basically a big research project. None of us are real estate developers. None of us, God forbid, have done an affordable housing project, which has its own deep, dark vagaries and alphabet soup of funding and grant mechanisms and all sorts of stuff like that. I'm not sure that any of us really is steeped in that. So, I think the part of us is to educate ourselves on how all that works, and to the extent it plays into how, this property could be developed. And then, I think it's basically running the traps. It's called 10 different ways on possible feasible ways that this property can be developed for affordable housing. And hopefully, if we go down 10 paths, then a couple of those paths will actually have, a glimpse of an actual pathway where this property could be feasibly developed for affordable housing. And, when I say feasible, I mean, economically feasible, logistically feasible, and, it's a public property, so it's politically feasible. If we just say, let's sell it to a developer to develop affordable housing, that's not an economically feasible plan. There's no developer is going to come develop this on their own. If they cost them $500,000 per unit to develop, and they have to sell it for $350,000 to make per unit to make it affordable, that's just not feasible. That'll never happen. So I think our charge as we move forward is to try to figure out a pathway that hits on all three of those. On the flip side, we can have a developer come and say, yeah, put up Park Central on this property, you'll get 80 residential units. Hey, developers will love to do that. It's very economically feasible for them to do that, but that's completely politically unfeasible for the town. So I think the challenge for us is to hopefully figure out a couple of pathways that, where this could happen economically and politically and logistically. The other thing we talked about is possibly having the town develop this property itself. And, the problem with that is logistics. Who's going to do it? How exactly does that happen? Who actually does it? Who hires the contractors? Who hires the developers? Who hires the engineers? Who does the design? Who spends, a year of their life when they have a job in their real life to develop this property? I think the answer is probably nobody. So if it is self-development, how exactly does that work? Who does it? Does the housing authority have a staff of developers on their staff that can take a piece of land and go develop? I don't think so. So, those are the sort of issues I think that we need to grapple with as we go down this path and trying to find a pathway. But at the end of the road, I think we do all this, we hopefully come up with a couple of pathways. We write it up into a report that we give to our masters. And then I think we're done. It's a policy decision at that point. There's 3 different ways. I think it's SHOPC and the Board of Selectmen and the CPC can decide whether they like any of the ways that we've outlined. And if they do like one of them, they'll hire another team to execute that. We'll be out of the picture at that point. So I think our job is just to come up with a pathway, give them a pathway, and then step out of the way. So that's the way I'm sort of viewing it. And I've been talking too long. I open up to everyone else for their views on this.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if we get far enough along there, if then anything large of a construction project, obviously, like we did with the police and fire station, obviously that was a separate committee just on the construction, and we would have a project manager running that, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a different I think it's more of what's the plan, and then once the plan's in place, how do we move that forward from an execution perspective? And there was a similar one that I saw at Acton where they did 12 affordable housing units, 6 duplexes, and it was put together by the housing authority. And they got the funding from the state for it, and they used some of the CPA funds for it. So it's an interesting project that to see like a housing authority actually do something.
Yeah.
So I think
And we talked about that, and that may be. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
I think to your point, like we're not construction people, so but neither were the people that were on the public safety building committee. But you have a project manager that does that, and you have contractors, and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's more us figuring out what could we do, what would the suggestion be there, what would the layout look like that doesn't impact the neighborhood but preserves the natural habitats, and et cetera, et cetera. So what kind of can we present to town meeting as the best use of that property? That it gets us an affordable housing goal, and the housing authority might be happy with, or whoever. I think that's kind of our charge. And then, once that's kind of established and they decide, then a whole new committee would need to get formed.
I mean, you go ahead, Alex.
To that point, I did bring it, I'm on the Housing Authority Board, and I did just brief them on what we've been discussing. And the manager's reaction was more, well, just where's the money going to come from? So, I think they would, she and they would be willing to help oversee certain things, but I think it'd have to be spoon-fed where the funding's coming from.
Right. Jesse and Joe, any thoughts on just kind of right now, big picture mission of our subcommittee? Is any of this sounding right to you guys?
Yeah, well, my input would be, and it's skipping ahead to the next agenda item, which is the MBTA Community Zoning District criteria. I checked through the planning department, and it didn't sound like they were, they wanted to do it for a lot that small. So it wouldn't just be for that lot. We would need to do it for a broader. And unfortunately, the guidelines are vague. But the feedback that Sarah got was we need to make a larger area if we're going to do an overlay district.
Yeah.
There's a lot of land there, isn't there? I mean, I went over and walked around a little, and there's quite a bit of land.
Well, 4 acres is, I guess, too small.
I think what concerns me in that particular regard was when I read the statement that was sent around was that we're looking at 15 units an acre. And that, I think when we're looking at it politically, I think an advantageous motto to take would be property value neutral. Because I think that if you want the neighborhood support, we're going to have to find a proposal that will do as little difference to their property values as possible. And I think that's sort of a fair way to look at it. I mean, there may be some quirks here and there that will accommodate in the way we look at the structure of this thing, but I would like to make it as easy as possible for the committees ahead of us. And by trying to adhere to at least that principle, I think it'll make it a much easier sell to the community and thereby make everybody's job easier. And if I don't see any way that we'd want to stick 15 units an acre on that property to begin with. And it just wouldn't take it. Although, I mean, the minute I read that, I said, well, I think I've seen some developments like that over in Newton, where they turned in part of the MBTA parking lots as well as a little bit of private land into higher rise unit structures. And, outside of putting that where the convenience store is down there next to the train station, I can't think of trying to put that in a neighborhood across from the church and those houses. Just not
Right.
even.
Well, let me take what we've all said, because I think they fit. I guess in my mind, the housing authority piece and the MBTA piece, sort of fall into two separate. Again, I'm getting very conceptual here, so just bear with me. Two separate broad approaches to this affordable housing development. And each of these broad approaches, I think, has a lot of tributaries, branches, however you want to call it. But one broad branch is town self-development. The town does it themselves, whether it's through the housing authority, whether Andrew just brought up, they did the public safety. Somehow the town did that on their own. They didn't, a private developer didn't do that. So, that's one pathway. And Andrew, that's one of the things we talked about last time, is whether the housing authority would be interested in getting involved in this. And I think at this point, the answer is yes. And then I think our job moving forward is to figure out what yes means. How does that happen in real life, logistically? What are the mechanics of that? How's the housing authority take it over? Where are they going to get the money? All the questions you just raised are the questions that we on that avenue want to flush out. And that's probably going to be one pathway at the end of this process that we present to our masters. The other broad avenue that we talked about, which is where I think the MBTA community fits in, is private development. A private developer, incentivizing a private developer to come in here and do this because they've got the expertise, they've got the logistics, they've got the funding. They're in a much better position logistically to develop a property like this than is the town. But that's where we start having this interaction between political issues like Joe just raised. For a developer to come in and do it, it has to be economically feasible to do that. And if they're going to spend, I'm just making up numbers, $4 million to develop the property, and it's only politically feasible to get 2 units on that, so they spend $2 million per unit developing it, and they're going to sell it for $350,000. They'll never do it. No one will ever do that. So, the dynamic there is to figure out, if it's going to be privately developed, how can we bring the developer's investment land / development costs down to a level where they can sell the units for, again, I'm making up numbers here, for $350,000, some affordable level, and still make money. And in broad parameters, again, I'm talking very broad principles here. That's the challenge of saying, look, if it's only 2 units, no way. If they get 15 units, so that their $4 million is broken up into 15 units, I can't even do the math off my head. Then you start to get something that's more economically feasible for a private developer. But then the bigger you get, the more we start bleeding into the political feasibility of that with the town. And so that's, the other side of the other avenue that is the town self-development. Where do they get the funds to do it? Where do they get the expertise to develop it? So that's, that's the tension. So, I think those are the two, basic routes that we, that we're looking at. I guess a third is we just rezone it with some kind of incentive zoning where there's an incentive to do affordable housing, and hope the developer comes along and does it at some point. But that's, that's sort of passive, and it may not happen for years.
What is considered affordable housing? What price ranges or structures are we talking about?
That's another good question that we all have to figure out. I mean, there's things like, 80% of median income and what exactly that means. I don't know the answer to that. We're still in this sort of slurry math stage, all of us, of figuring out, but that's one of the details that we'll hone in on. But you're right. I mean, I don't think we're talking about low income housing, just philosophically. And, Alex and Jesse have heard me spout off on this at SHOPSI meetings, and, they can't get me to shut up. But, when we say affordable housing, we're not looking to put a low income housing project in here where it scares everyone thinking that there's, low income housing. There's other towns around us that have low income, and we're a leafy suburb. I don't think we're looking to put low income housing, but, from SHOPSI's standpoint, you guys have heard this before when you say that, I think there's not enough housing in town that people who have good jobs can afford. Someone who makes $100,000 can't afford even a starter house in Southborough. And so, in my mind, we want to create housing that a healthcare worker or a school teacher or a first responder or an artist can actually afford to live in Southborough with their family without having to pay for an $850,000 house. I think that's what we're trying
Can
to.
I ask another silly question?
Yeah, no silly
Can,
questions.
are we, in this process, are we looking to control who we sell to?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I don't know. It depends on what pathway our masters choose. I think our job is to outline some pathways where the town doesn't sell it, they develop them themselves, or they do sell it and try to make a profit. Or I suppose, in the overall rubric of trying to get a developer to do this and lowering their land costs, I'm sure there's at least one scenario where we deed the property to a developer as an incentive to lower their land costs to do this project. I mean,
it might be make it more easier political sell, but also advantageous if we can control some of the sale and if we can get our own, fire, police, and teachers into that housing. And I knew a few
Great
teachers that
idea.
do live in town, but obviously politically it'd be a lot easier to sell if we can work some of that into this deal somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I know just a tad bit. I know that when you put affordability restrictions on it, and it's administered through the alphabet soup of state agents, the EOCD or the executive office of, one of those offices has regulations for affordability, and there's a lottery system, and people have to do paperwork to prove their income, and you have to be fair about it. You can't discriminate against different people. So it's a little bit trickier to just say, hey, all of our police and firemen in town have first dibs at this. I'm not sure whether that's possible, but I'd love to look into that because that'd be fantastic.
One thing I know that the commission that I'm on with the housing is veterans and so on and so forth to get priority.
Right.
So
And can we give,
be-
and so I don't know the answer, but maybe
There
there's a
can
priority
be
that we
some
can give to
priority,
local.
yeah. I just don't know who gets it.
Right.
Certainly can't say only purple people get first priority, but
Right.
I think I've seen first responders getting or town residents getting preference. So I think there's certainly some preference.
Yeah.
And Joe, just so you know, I know you brought up the 15 units per acre. It's still held to Title V in Chapter 40, section whatever the Wetlands Protection Act is.
Oh.
So you would still have to figure out how to fit 60 units of a septic in there. Which if they want to build the sewer system for the town, maybe great. But we'll talk about it. But the kind of idea with the housing authority was we could put that zoning there to check the box with the state so that we don't lose our grant funding that we use the mass development and all that kind of grants that we get. But the housing authority being a pseudo town agency, I mean, it's not part of the town government, but it's voted on members from the town, would be some control. So it'd be kind of like.
I'm sorry, Andrew, what'd you say? What control?
So it would be some control of the town.
Some control.
The housing authority doesn't report through the town government structure. It's a standalone elected committee, but they're voted on by the citizens of the town. So I hope that would help influence it. So I mean, technically by right, they could put up 60 units per acre, but being members of the town and being elected by the town, I would hope that they would have some input into what we put there. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, where we check the box of having that zoning so we don't lose our grants, and we also get to put the affordable housing where we want it, get the right information there, and it's not. And then Jesse, there is that one property across the street on Atwood Street that actually connects across the road to South Union that the town owns. That's another 11 acres. So, maybe if we add everything up and we're at like 15, 16 acres, that's all controlled by either the town housing authority, we might be able to hopefully get a large enough piece together.
Do you want to parlay? I'm sorry, go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah. Andrew, I'm looking at the assessor's map. Which
I was just going to say, let's look at the assessor's
lot
map.
are you referring to?
Let me just, Alex, could you make me a co-host and I'll share it? It's the parcel 080000103. It's Atwood Street off. It's right in between 46 and 44 Atwood, and it kind of goes in behind all those properties.
Oh, is it like in
I
gray?
can put you on share, but I don't see what it is I'm supposed to be sharing.
I'll share it. I just need to, my sharing is disabled.
Okay,
So Andrew, is that lot that's like behind? I need to enlarge this actually.
Are you looking at the zoning map I sent around, Jesse?
Yep.
Let me pull that up.
Let's see if I can- So like it
Yeah. So if you see the blue line at the top of 21 Island, and see
Yeah.
how it goes right across the street to that gray area
Yeah.
in between those two houses on Atwood Street.
Yeah, it's like a pork shop, peninsula that kind of winds around 41A and then
Then
becomes
it
big.
goes up and around, and it's
Yeah.
even on the top of the map. So it's 11.4 acres total.
What is that again, Andrew? That's owned by the town?
By the town.
Well, I can tell you that, we have lots of public hearings going on right now for a downtown business district. And it's extremely contentious and there's all kinds of pushback from the abutters and you don't have to read very far into the blog to make your head want to explode from all that back and forth. I'm a little bit dubious as to whether or not in this neighborhood and with this layout, that would work personally.
Yeah.
But I guess technically, it's possible. I think, we might be better served to kind of skip the zoning angle on this and just look at this as the town using the funds in the Affordable Housing Trust to convert the building to a residential dwelling, like 4 units. And just moving forward that way.
Well, look, I think our charge is to look at, that might be one option, but I think our charge is to come up with a few different pathways to not necessarily say, hey, do this, but I guess I envision are reporting back to them and saying, here's 4 possible avenues for you to do it.
when you say 4 units, are we talking like, if we're talking to school, are we talking like 4 condominiums?
Yes,
Okay,
except this is where the housing authority comes in. The housing authority, they would actually, instead of being condos, they would just be rental units managed by the housing authority.
Would that be terrible? I don't see that as being a terrible outcome.
not if it allows a local fireman or a policeman to be able to bring their family into the town.
Instead of having to pay $3,500 a month for a place in Madison Place, they can, afford something for $1,500 a month in 21 Island Street. That wouldn't be a terrible outcome.
And it's actually doable. There's substantial funds in the Affordable Housing Trust. The logistics of getting at it, we'd have to do a presentation to the Community Preservation Committee and the Affordable Housing Trust to get at the money to do it.
For the housing authority to do it.
So that's a good question, Tom. I don't know if the housing authority actually gets into the business of renovating, managing projects like that.
We have done, well, we're certainly overseeing and renovating some houses around town for rental.
Right, but have they ever converted a non-residential building into a residential building before?
Not while I've been here.
Right.
Well,
I'd be curious to know if that, so Alex, at the beginning of this meeting, the question was posed as to whether or not the housing authority would have the appetite to get involved in this. And I heard you respond that, it really comes down to the funding. I would go, I'm just personally recommend you go back to the housing authority and say, well, let's assume that we have the money. Or do we have the bandwidth to manage a project of this scope?
Okay. Mhm.
If they do, that makes our job a lot easier.
Of course, if there's the money, you can hire a project manager.
Yeah, and if we
Well,
use,
Andrew, aren't you the one that told me that the Housing Authority did Colonial Gardens as they develop that? I mean, that
We
seemed like be a
manage
pretty
it. We manage
sizable,
it. I don't know if we did it. We manage it.
but they didn't
I know
develop it?
Mahoney used to own it as a farm or something.
yeah, I mean, I know I think the housing authority got the land and built it, or somebody, the town built it and gave it to the housing authority. Again, it's kind of semantics, whether it's the
Right.
housing authority or it's the quote unquote town. You're still going to need, you're going to have an OPM for the project because it's over a certain amount of money. So you're going to have somebody watching the construction, and you'll probably have a slew of town people that will be on a committee monitoring it, like we're doing in the town. We did with the public safety building and the library.
How did that go down, Andrew? Who? I mean, how did the town? I'm sure Brian Shea didn't go out and just, GC the entire project. I mean, how did that happen administratively? Did the board of selectmen hire a developer to run all the traps on that?
You have a developer, you have your own project manager that works on behalf of the town, with the developers and the architects. And then for public safety, you had Jason Malinowski, who was there approving, invoices and inspecting work and that kind of stuff on a day-to-day basis. So I mean, they had a weekly meeting and phone calls to make sure that the project was being done. So I mean, I think that we would probably pull together some volunteers in the town and have an OPM that's going to be day-to-day that can provide the input. But we've obviously done larger projects like this, townhouse renovation, a library facade, building schools. The town's taken on large construction projects. So to convert this, and I think the other question that we, is, do we look to add additional properties or houses or townhouses around with the other land that there's there, things of that nature. Which
that's where I get a little bit of the willies as far as I think that we stand a chance of getting, a few units on 21 Highland through town meeting. I think if we get into more than that, and to Tom's point, maybe we should just present it as an option.
Yeah.
But I mean,
hopefully we're presenting a range of options, because I have a different philosophical view. I want there to be more affordable housing in town. So if this property is an opportunity to create 8 or 10 units of affordable housing rather than just taking the existing building and making it into 3, I'd rather have 8 or 10 than 3.
Is there any appetite? Is there any appetite for disposing of this building and allowing this property to be developed? I think in the manner more that you're talking about, which is really more of a uniform development, where you probably could easily get 8 or 10 units on this property that will all look fairly attractive and uniform to the neighborhood itself, as opposed to doing it piece and parcel and having to deal with this building.
I think, Joe,
but now you're talking market rate though.
Yeah, we tried to sell it and nobody wanted
it. Right. I mean, that's the thing. There's development challenges here, and I don't think our job is to figure out the development challenges to a private developer. Our job is just to try to figure out, a pathway where if the town wanted to go down that path, they could go to the developer and say, here's a way. If you want to come in and put in affordable housing in this thing, here's your pathway. We can give you a discount on the land. We can get you the grant here. We can get you the grant there. We can have town managers help. That's one pathway is to figure out a way to make this economically feasible to a developer.
Because that building is the albatross on that property.
Well, there's historical pieces to it too. They can't just tear it down. So,
a way of disclosure, I have a definite conflict here because I am by nature a preservationist of historic homes and have and buildings, and have chaired in many towns committees for preserving historic structures. So, obviously I'm not the decider here, but I just ought to disclose that that's not what I personally want to hear.
Yeah, and I tend to think that politically it's going to be tough to tear down that building. And then there is a historic demolition bylaw too, which throws a wrench into. So I tend to think that however this is done, that building is going to need to be preserved.
Alex, could you make me a co-host? I just want to put up an image.
Figure out how to do it.
So I think if you just right click on me and the participants, you can.
Okay.
I think, and that's where I kind of get into it with the housing authority is it doesn't make sense for a developer to do any of this because there's not enough money to be made. But there's enough grant money
Okay, I'm doing it now.
between the state and
Okay, you got it.
federal government that we could get grants to kind of do it.
But that, just to, in my mind, so for instance, and I'll talk about more a little bit because I've been looking into the MBTA community. I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, so this is
forward
just-
with what you have.
This is one that they just did in Ashland with the housing authority in Ashland. They put up
Wow, that looks
6
great.
duplex units.
Yeah,
So there's
that
12
looks awesome.
units in here. I mean, I don't think we would want this big of something, but I thought
No,
like,
but the point is the housing authority pulled it off. They
Yeah.
self-developed it without a private developer doing it.
they got, I think, some grants from the state. They got some money from the Mass Housing Partnership, and they used a little CPA funds. But I thought renovating the building, maybe put 1 or 2 of these little duplexes somewhere there might not be a bad use of the land. But that's
Right.
kind of a thought I had.
I agree with that, Tom. I mean, that would be a great outcome if we got 2 or 3 units out of the existing building and had 2 or 3 other 2-unit townhouses, and we got 8 units or 10 units out of it. That'd be fantastic, I think.
Yeah, and Jesse, while I have it up, this is that big other piece that kind of keeps snaking its way around.
But Andrew, how does that factor into this? I'm not getting the nexus.
The Ashland one or this piece of property?
This piece of property. How does that figure into what we're doing with 21 Highland?
Here's Highland here, and it's across the street. So you
No, I
make
know
that-
it's there, but how does it go into
Right.
our analysis of?
Tom, he brought that up because in the context of trying to get the MBTA zoning overlay.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So you want to shift to that a little bit? Because I've done a little.
Sure.
I think my charge from last meeting was to dig down a little bit into the MBTA community and the regulations. So I don't want to stay all night. Why don't I just give you quickly what I found? So a couple of things, some of which we've already talked about, but let me just say it to everybody. So in order to satisfy the MBTA community to the statute, it's got to be within a half mile of an MBTA station. It's got to be of a reasonably sized district. And I'll come back and talk about each of these briefly. The minimum density is 15 units per acre, which again, we've already talked about. And by the way, the units have to be, oh geez, I forgot the terminology. They have to be amenable to families, for lack of a better term. So, that sort of takes out the idea of creating, 10 one-bedroom, condos for yuppies who are only making $75,000. It's I think we're looking at 2-bedroom plus units. So let me go back and talk about each of those. So there's been some discussion about this site not being within a half mile of the commuter rail station. And I am scratching my head. I went on to, this is very technical. I went on to Bing Maps, and they have a function where you can point to 2 points on a map and it'll tell you the distance between 2 points. So I think a mile is 5,280 linear feet. Yeah, you can do it right there, Andrew. Great. A half a mile is 2,640 linear feet. And I see it being less than 2,000 linear feet from the train station. What's that coming up with there, Andrew?
Yeah, the same. And I talked to Sarah about it a little bit. And it's like if you put it into Google Maps and you're driving from here, you got
driving distances. Yeah, if you go driving distance, it's going to be longer, but it's
yeah. But it's technically the property starts over here, right? So if you're doing this, the furthest point is 1,400 feet. The train station ramp, one side is here. That's 1,800. I mean, even if you do the other property over there, that's 2,000, and that's 1,800 there. So I think most of the time when they do distances, and Tom, you might know more from your background, but it's as the bird flies.
yeah, exactly. In my mind, there's no real question as to whether we meet the half mile requirement for this site. So let's go to the second part that you just touched upon, Andrew. It has to be a reasonably sized district, and Sarah has made some preliminary discussions with DHCD. And then, this is a new statute, so there aren't regulations, hasn't been around for a long time, hasn't been applied a lot. So DHC themselves are still flushing out what the statute actually means and how they're going to interpret it.
Yeah.
But they told Sarah in no uncertain terms that they do not believe a single 4-acre parcel would constitute in itself a reasonable district. So if we're going to go down that path with the MBTA community, Sarah's played around with some mock-ups of just making a bigger overlay district. And keep in mind, just because your house is in a district doesn't mean that, your property has changed, that all of a sudden it's in a commercial, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that there's more possibility for other land in that property to be developed. So in my mind, it's a relatively easy, not easy, but it's not an insurmountable obstacle to satisfy the reasonable district size requirement. We would just make the district bigger if we went down that, I think.
Yeah.
The next issue is, 15 units per acre. I know we talked about it before. And I just think we're just going to have to flesh this out between the 6 of us or the 5 of us as we go forward as to what. So I think this goes into the private developer avenue. I think it's consistent with that, because if a private developer does this, they're going to need to get 15 units to make their project economically feasible. And again, I'm not saying we're definitely going to do that, but I think if we present 3 or 4 different options to the town at the end of this process, I think at least one of the options has to be, here's a pathway for private development. And if we go that pathway, the project's going to have to be more dense. And, here's one option. It can be an MBTA community. And if it is, it's got to be at least 15 years. That's a sort of panoply of different, pathways I think we end up presenting to the town at the end of this process. But just thinking on that, that's what this MBTA community is sort of primed for a private developer, to do. And then the question for me is that I'm a little fuzzy on is, so what does that mean? We fit the criteria for an MBTA community under Chapter 48, Section 3A. So what? What does that mean? Well, how is that beneficial? And the only thing I've seen so far is the information that says that if you're an MBTA community, you qualify for various state grants and state funding. And so what I don't know right now, and probably is an item for us to flush out as we go forward, is what exactly does that mean? What funding does it qualify for? How much is it? How would that come into play if a private developer did this? Just for comparison, if you do a 40R project, which I know we're not doing, but just for comparison, it's very clear. If you do a 40R project, the minute you do the zoning that would even allow for 21 units, DHCD gives you $75,000. And then for every unit you build, DHCD gives you $3,000. So it's very objective. If you do a 40R, that's the economic incentive and economic benefit for that. As we say here today, I don't know what the economic benefits are for being an MBTA community. If we fit this criteria and a developer wanted to do this and the town wanted to do this, how that translates into actual, money from the state. So I think that's something for us to drill down on as we proceed down this research project. And let me just throw it out there. Does anyone have any idea on that?
Yeah, so it's not that this gives you more grant opportunities for the construction of something. It's if we don't comply, the town loses out on state funds for anything. So the biggest one I know of is MassWorks. So we use MassWorks for a lot of our road projects. So I think MassWorks might have done the Main Street project, but we wouldn't be eligible for MassWorks grant.
If we didn't do what? If we didn't create an MBTA district, we would never be able to get MassWorks again?
Correct.
So there's an economic incentive for the town just to create one, if for no other reason than to just create one.
And that's why I'm kind of like, if we can create one basically with only Southborough owned land, that we don't have to worry about 15 units per acre because it's going to have to go through town meeting for approval.
That's where you're bringing in that other parcel of land. The problem is there is such thing as there's something called spot zoning, where we have to be a little bit careful. And we can flush out whatever other things. I mean, Sarah was playing around with different district boundaries that would just touch on as few individual residential properties as possible. So, maybe that's a way to do it. But in your view, Andrew, it's sort of separate and apart from our charge with respect to 21 Highland. The town needs to do that anyway for larger purposes than this project.
And this was just one of those where it was the only place that I could see where it would be kind of limited in scope in terms of more digestible for the town. I mean, if we threw this basically on any property within half a mile of the train station, that whole area down there, I mean, it would be insane. Every property owner would be like, I don't want, I have an acre lot next to me. That means a 15 unit.
I know it's hard. I guess it's hard to communicate this to people that rezoning the property or putting an overlay over the zoning that the property's in isn't. It's. I'm not a politician, so I don't know the vagaries of it, but I don't understand it.
And Jesse's seen. Anytime you say it's by right, people's eyes open up wide. So that would be my concern.
Well, but Tom, if you think about it, if you live on one of those houses on Atwood, and you're at town meeting and you hear that we're advocating for 15 unit per acre density, literally in a lot.
Oh, I get that. I get that, Jesse. I just don't understand why they would care if their individual lot was rezoned or had a zoning overlay that allowed. I can see them opposing the project, whatever project goes on there, but having their own property have an overlay zoning on is what I don't understand.
Well, it's because of what's going to happen next door to them. It's because they don't want to have to sell their house and move.
But my point is, if we created a zone that didn't touch anyone's lot, they would and that allowed us to do the project. They would oppose the project no matter what. So my point is, if the zone is expanded to cover the lot, it's inconsequential. It doesn't change the equation for them. The fact that their properties they're opposed to the actual project, not to the rezone.
Do these pieces of parcels have to be contiguous in any way, or just a total of?
I don't know. These ones would be if we did the Sulph property, which is like 7/10 of an acre, the 21 Highland, which is a little over 4. And Tom, I was able to find the deed, and the deed has it at 4 and 59/100ths.
How were you able to get this deed? I went onto the registry of deeds, and the records only went back to 1961. This deed was like in 1915.
You have to look it up by the actual book one from 1911.
But that was online. They had it online Yeah. Could you shoot me a copy of that?
Yeah, I'll find it out.
Okay,
But,
great.
Yeah, so
I hung up on that. I went on the website and they didn't have any records prior to 1961. How'd you get it?
You have to go to the actual book page, which they listed on the assessment we did. So I knew the page, so I could look at that.
Oh, nice. Thank you. That sounds great. So wait, what did they say it was? Does that include parcel 22, parcel 2C?
No, just the 121 Island. And it's the same if you go onto the GIS and you add up the space, it's the same calculation, so it makes sense.
Oh, it's
But
like
it's just
I
a
mean,
little
not that it
over
matters that much in the overall scheme of things, but it's 4 acres, not 3.
Exactly. So if we do, the 7/10 of an acre, we do the 4 acres for that property and 11.4 for the other Southborough owned land. I mean, I think in a town of our size, I think that's a pretty good size overlay district. I mean, that's bigger than downtown, I think.
What are we
Good idea.
in the scheme of things, when we do this overlay, are we actually required to use it that way?
No.
We just have to create it.
It just
So we
has
can
to
It's
be
just like
create
any other zone. You can zone desert land as commercial property. No one's ever going to develop on it, but it's zoned.
So the idea is that we get the overlay so that we applicable under all these programs, not actually use it.
So we check the box, Joe, but the land is completely owned by the town. It would need town meeting vote. And so the idea of getting, and that 11-acre parcel, a 160 unit apartment building would be nearly impossible.
Well, it'd be horrendous. I'm just saying. So the clear purpose of this is to get it, but not to use it. That's all. All I'm getting at.
I think there's 2 different questions. In the bigger picture, way above us, the town needs to create some district for bigger purposes of getting grant money for other things. The town needs to create this district, and that sort of, for that purpose, is beyond the scope of our mission. But for our mission, if this property is zoned under that MBTA community district, then I think, I'm not sure, but I think that it brings into play grant money potentially for a private developer to do development on this land.
Yeah, no, I'm only asking this because, and that's why I asked about the non-contiguous property, because if we are zoning this, but then they're going to require us to use this. And I don't mean to bring this back in, but
Yeah,
acquiring a property like Fitzgerald's would make sense, and including that in the bundle, because then that's the piece that we sell it for the 15-unit development, so to speak, while we keep the other stuff, just in the scope of things there for everybody to say, okay, we have our big parcel, but only use the little part that we do develop, so that we are applicable for all the grants still. Because if we zone it this way and we're not ever going to try and use it, and then they require it, then we're still stuck.
I don't think it's a requirement. I think it's just you have to adopt the zone.
Okay.
And that's why I'm just trying to figure out what within a half acre or half mile of the
Sure.
train station wouldn't cause an uproar to check the box. This is the best example.
right.
Yep.
That's
No, I'm
a
all
good
good.
idea.
I'm just going to the next step down the road and going like, oh, it
Yeah.
sounds good, but are we really gonna?
It's going to be interesting to see if we can educate people as to that's what we're doing, so they accept it.
And again, I think for our purposes, that's going to become the next subcommittee or group that actually executes whatever it is. Again, I think our job is just give them some options, some of which have more political, risk than others, and the people smarter and higher than us will make the decision as a policy matter, which one they want to pursue.
I like the way Andrew is thinking, just because if this needs to be set up at the start, then yeah, it needs to be set up at the start, and then the redevelopment of that come afterward, just because that way we are applicable. And I like that Andrew's throwing that out there, because if that has to be done first, let's get that done first.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's can we kill two birds with one stone? If not, then let's just worry about the one bird, right? If
Right. Well, I don't think that getting that is necessary for our purposes. Our purposes can be, our site can be developed for affordable housing without it being an MBTA community. But
Sure.
the MBTA community may be beneficial to us.
Yeah.
if we can kind of kill two birds with one stone, get
Right.
it used at the same time, and have people be comfortable with it. Because I think the big concern would be, okay, we're going to make this, by right 15 units, but it's not going to go to the housing authority. It's going to go to a private developer that can do whatever they want with it, right? That's where I think people in town are going to have an issue with it. Where if we
Right.
say,
But again, I think that's not our problem to solve. It's our problem. It's our job to give them some options and let them make the decision how many slings and arrows they want to get at the town meeting when they choose the one that they want.
I think the big thing is, will the DHCD approve this kind of hobbled together 3-parcel district of 15 acres or so, or is that not applicable, or not large enough, or not what they're thinking, or they can they see through what we're working on?
I mean, it may be, and I don't want to get too bogged down in that, because again, I think it's a little bit beyond our scope. But if they're just in this feeling out process, why not just float it out there and see if it flies? If it flies, great. If they say no, then we'll go back to the drawing board.
Right now we're considering compliance until they haven't really set a date of when you have to have it done by, but it could be years down the road, I'm assuming.
Yeah, Sarah said that they're planning on sending out criteria or guidance as to how they're going to view this. So who knows what that's going to be? And I thought that was going to come out sooner rather than later. Or they gave her an indication that was coming out soon. All right. Well, listen, we've been on this for an hour. I mean, I think that I wanted to just talk kind of conceptually and as to what we're doing as a mission going forward with this. And I don't want to keep us on tonight all night, but I sort of think, and let me throw this out to you all too, the way we're going to handle this and reaching this endpoint where we do a report and analysis and that we produce, is it better to be more immersive in this project for a shorter period of time? Hypothetically meet twice a month for 3 months rather than once a month for 6 months, where we just sort of meet, we talk about some stuff, we hang up, we go back to our regular lives, and then the next month the meeting comes up and we call, we say, oh my God, we got the meetings tonight. You pull together your notes and try to figure out what we talked about last time. I guess it may be less hassle for all of us if we knock this out earlier and be more immersive on it in a short term than spreading this out over the next 9 or 12, 9 or 10 months. I think our charge ends in June of 2022. So, does that sound palatable to you guys? You want to, just immerse in this and try to work out these questions and these issues and try to, meet twice a month for the next 3 months and see if we can get something concrete by, early January.
I think it's better for the town. I think it's better for the town if we move faster.
I think,
Yeah.
and Joe, I think one of the issues is we're delaying some of the capital improvements to South Union that need to be done. We're trying to figure out what we're doing with it, so I don't want to delay it too long.
Yeah.
Sounds like
nothing
sooner is better.
major, nothing's a safety issue, but there's some maintenance that needs to be done that we're kind of holding off.
Okay, so there is an urgency component. So I'm sort of thinking, what next steps? What should we do? And so I guess in my view, there's two different pathways. We can divide us up to focus on different things so that we're not all six doing everything. And it seems to me like it's a one ripe area in the rubric of town self-development is the housing authority. I think at this point, Alex has spoken to them to see if they had any kind of appetite for getting involved in this project. And I think the answer is yes. So now the next step is, drill down on what exactly that means. We have these questions. If the housing authority does get involved, what is that involvement? Is it just funding? Are they going to develop? Are you going to,
In my mind, I'd have to sort of test as to how big they would be comfortable going. I mean, if we're talking 4 rentable units inside of the building or most of the building, or we're talking about construction of townhouses and so on and so forth in addition, I'll try to test out as to just what their tolerance is.
okay, so here's what I'm kind of thinking, because I think that my impression, I'm just throwing it out there, Alex and Andrew seem to have the most knowledge and experience for how the town's self-development process has worked before, could work, how the housing, can you guys be the people to start doing more investigation on that rubric, talk to the housing authority and figure out exactly what it means for them to be involved, get more specifics on where the funding would be, how they would manage it, how, would the housing authority themselves manage it, or would the town need to put together a separate committee to handle the development and the design and all that stuff?
I'll ask the question. I'll ask the questions.
Yeah, but I sort of imagine more than just asking questions, is to do a little more legwork and research as to how that was done before, and sort of report. I mean, maybe we got our next meeting in 2 weeks. And then, see what you've been able to come up with from there to take this concept of housing authority involvement and see what that actually means in real life and how that works in practice. And flesh out those issues. Would they, if it was a 15-unit townhouse development, could they not do it? If it was a 3-unit townhouse development, would that's those sorts of questions. And then maybe. And then the other thing I think, which is I think Jesse's wheelhouse is, are there things in our zoning that can be done? What is the zoning on this thing? What does it allow as of right, for development? What are the provisions in the zoning today that if a private developer wanted to come in and do it for multifamily housing, they could do? What does it allow now? And what's sort of feasible from a pure zoning standpoint. Forget about economics, forget about politics. If somebody came in and wanted to develop that under our current zoning, what would that be? Because I sort of think that we should identify potential obstacles that we have in our zoning that could be a disincentive for somebody to come in and develop this property. Does that make sense, Jesse? Okay. And
I think,
then,
I think
what's that?
in terms of the housing, the question is a little bit about like, how do we build it and how do we do that? They can run it, right? So let's assume it's built. So I think it's less, it's a town build it and hand it over. Do they help build it? I think a next step probably would be coming up with maybe some scenarios and some cost estimates. I would maybe suggest that we bring somebody in to look at the building and say, you could make 3, 4, 5, this is what the layout might look like, units out of the building. Here's what the septic system is now, that's good. Here's what plans you guys already have from perk testing that we could use for other units. I think we could go to the CPC committee and ask for some admin funds to do some of that analysis, and have somebody come in and do that work. I think it would go a long way to kind of mock it up, know what the pricing would be, and then we can work with the housing authority, the DHCD, MHP, and some of the other organizations to say, if we did this, what would the funding that you could provide? What funding might we have from CPC if the town would approve it? What funding is in the housing authority trust fund? What is the rental income? Kind of what's the economics of it?
Yeah, I love that's ultimately where we want to end up. So if you think you can do all that in the next 2 weeks before we meet again, that'd be great. So one thing I caution a little bit, because I don't know at this point, we're just talking about concept of doing a affordable project on this property. We don't know yet what the affordable project will be. I don't know whether, we've talked about three or four different widely variable scenarios. I tend to think that the first step is finding out what, because I think finding out what the septic system will bear. I think that's hiring an engineer to do an analysis. Are we there yet? I don't, an analysis for what they can figure out what the existing septic system is and how much, I guess they can figure out how much it will support in terms of number of units, I suppose.
Coming in on that trust fund thought, there isn't really one. It's just whatever the state throws at us to allow us to do what they feel the housing authority should be able to do.
Check with John Wood, because I was having my conversation with him at Shopsy, and he was looking into that.
Well, he'll be at the meeting, I think. So, okay.
Yeah. So Andrew, I say have at it. Whatever information you think you can get, but I guess maybe I'm just not wrapping my mind around it correctly. It's hard for me to imagine how you can get cost estimates without knowing what the project is or would be, or maybe you get a range. If it's a 6-unit project, it would be X. If there was a 15-unit project, it'd be Y. If we only did nothing but just rehab the existing building, maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, like rehabbing the existing building with the current layout of the floors and the elevators and the plumbing. An architect and an engineering firm says, okay, we suggest, to get the most bang for your buck, 6 2-bedroom units.
But are we at the point now of hiring an engineering firm to do that?
I think we know what the pieces are, right? We know the building. We know what's there. We know what's existing. And they can tour it and they can use the floor plans you already have to kind of mock up what. Because
it just means somebody hiring an architect and choosing an architect and putting out to public bid. Don't we need to do all that stuff? It's.
Well, but in all new builds, you're going to have a range of sort of almost standard pricing in terms of, you're looking at a property starting from scratch. If you have a perk, great. They know the basic cost of a building before they go and build it. Every builder does. Otherwise, they wouldn't go into it the way they do. They know how much that house is likely to cost within 10 or 15%. So we should be able to find out if we're building 4 or 5 townhouses in a row. There's a pricing model for that. It just depends on the options that you're doing. It should,
right.
We just we can connect with somebody that knows a ballpark price for us.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Do you guys want to run the traps on that and talk to contractors, and talk to, because I don't know that we're in a position yet to get people to give us money to start hiring.
I think that's probably a more poignant point in finding this out. We can find out some basic pricing on those sorts of things, but why don't we try and put together something, several options, and then that'll allow us to price it out easier.
Yeah, the other one is, Alex, I don't know if since you're on the housing authority, if you and I wanted to talk to Acton, who just did those townhouses to talk about, how they got funding, what funding they got, how much it cost them, was it a good project, et cetera.
That would probably be worthwhile.
And I don't know,
That'd be fantastic. I mean, that's a sort of,
maybe we
You know.
start there, and I'll send out some information on that project, because it looked pretty good.
and where was that?
Yeah.
Ashland? Is that where that project was, Andrew?
Acton.
Acton.
Tom, just so you know, Sam is in the attendees.
Okay. Does Sam have any questions that he wants to pose to us or thoughts?
Let me see. His hand didn't go up, but let me see.
Okay.
Sam, any guidance from the selectmen? I know you're pretty knowledgeable there. He always doesn't always like to share.
Sam, I'm clicking allowing you to talk if that's something you want to do.
You just texted not now.
Okay.
Yeah, he's good. He's good.
I don't have any specific comment at this point. I think I'm, again, very supportive of the concept here. Would love to find a way to do something like this. And, again, the funding is always a key challenge, but given the federal money that's rolling around out there, I think there's some interesting possibilities maybe with some of that in terms of some of the infrastructure and housing stuff there. And the state has a lot of money that they're sitting on now for various purposes, and I have no idea when they're going to free some of that up, but there's a ton of money out there. The question is, how do we find the right projects? And we've just hired a consultant to help us apply for grant money for things. We're going to interview that person next week. So maybe that creates some opportunity to get some things done there. But I'll reinforce, as I've been reminded many times, I speak officially for nobody here. So
No, I get it.
we will.
Hey, Sam, can I ask you a question about that person? Is that you? So it sounds like you're about to, you haven't hired them yet, that consultant.
We have hired him, actually. We approved
Yeah.
the
Do you
contract.
think, do I have permission to go talk to that person to see? Because those are the people that just know, what I always say, call the alphabet soup
Yep.
of funding mechanisms. I mean,
Yeah.
these guys just know it inside out. I'd love to just sit down and have a coffee with that person, cup of coffee, and just say, okay, this is what we're planning to do. What alphabet soup funding, mechanisms
Yep.
could come into play for this?
Yep. I personally think that's a wonderful idea, but I will get in deep trouble if I suggest that to you. So,
You didn't suggest it to. I suggested it to
but
you.
I will raise that. We're going to interview that person. Going to talk with that person next week, and I will
Okay.
raise that question and see what kind of response I get. But I think that, to me, the more we can get folks in the various committees and departments or whatever connected with that
Yeah.
person, you get better ideas that come out of that versus trying to funnel communication through a constricted channel there. So you got to coordinate, but you also got to have opportunity for people to talk more directly, I think. So that's my personal.
Right, definitely. So just in the spirit of covering, hopefully covering different bases, and maybe, I guess I'm focused, and maybe Joe can join me in this in terms of allocating responsibilities between the five of us. I want to explore more of what's involved in private development. And maybe we go to that path and the answer is it's just not economically feasible to do it with a private developer. No private developer would touch it. But I think, as part of our responsibility, my responsibility to explore that, to see what it's going to do. And maybe it's me having a cup of coffee with, Bill DiPietri and Jack Bartolini and some of the usual suspects in town to see.
Bob Moss, who did
Bob Moss, yeah, I love Bob Moss. Yeah, so that's what I plan to do, and then I plan to do some research. Maybe Joe can help me offline and just researching what these grant monies are out there. Again, I'm not a developer. I'm not affordable housing. I'm going into this cold to see what these things are. So I'll start investigating these grant programs and see what the requirements are, and see if I can start figuring out which ones could come into play for this.
Good. More information like that, I would think, is very helpful. And again, I will raise the issue next week and see what people say about it. But I would certainly think that would be productive, my personal opinion.
Okay, that sounds great. So why don't we make this game plan? I know it's a little amorphous. Do we want to set a date for the next meeting? Again, I know it's time sensitive. So do we want to do it in a couple of weeks? Say September 23rd. September 16th. Would that give people enough time to get anything? When's the housing authority meeting again, Alex? I guess you don't need to go to a full meeting. You could talk to staff and figure out some of these things, right? And
Well, so we say staff, if there's a director, and so I can speak to her.
Yeah.
Other than that, until the meeting comes, I look at my calendar. I think it's probably, we're not having one this month. I think September, let's see, HGC.
do you want to, can I just throw out the 23rd, and that's 3 weeks for us to all sort of do some legwork on our various, focus
That works for me.
assignments? And report
That's
back.
good.
Does that seem like enough time, Andrew?
Just said the 23rd?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that work for everybody? Is 7 o'clock good for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. All right, gotcha. So do we need to I'm new at this. We need to make a motion to
Not to schedule a meeting.
not to schedule a meeting? Okay. All right. So we'll schedule a meeting for Thursday, the 23rd.
Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
I do have one question. I'm surprised at how Andrew got out of babysitting duty tonight.
You know what? I just realized that the 23rd is my wife's birthday. Can we?
Very strategic.
I'm glad that just occurred to me. What do people think about the 21st, Tuesday?
That works.
21st. Okay.
That was close time.
Oh God, that would have been a disaster. It's a big one too. It's a big one. So I can't mess that one up. All right, so let's make it for the 21st at 7 o'clock. And do we need to do a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, gotcha. And just really quick before we do adjourn, Joe's going to do the minutes. He'll circulate them around, and we'll meet in 2 weeks and go over them then. So that sounds great. Oh, sorry. So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Alex.
Yeah.
What's your ruling on the motion?
Oh, excuse me?
What's your ruling on the motion to adjourn?
Oh, I seconded, so I guess I say aye.
Okay, Jesse,
Aye.
Andrew.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
And I say aye. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great night.
Nice job.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.